Today we're going to talk about cloud migration. There's been a continuous influx of cloud migration projects coming to the PS team, and it's quite different from your typical RPA implementation projects. With cloud migration, we're not necessarily building new things, but we're helping clients move to the cloud, maybe from on-prem or from another cloud or from automation suite. And we have special tools for doing that. I know from the SA team, I myself, Zach, and James have done quite a few of these migration projects, and then we've worked with a few of you from the PM team to complete these projects. But for the majority of the PS team, I think you may not have been involved in a cloud migration project. So this presentation is meant to be a brief 101 overview so that you get an idea what happens with these projects, and if one day your help is needed on one of these projects, where can you get additional resources and support. So the agenda today is to talk about why cloud migration, what are the different types of migration, what are the tools we typically use, the overall strategy, and also besides the orchestrator, what are some other common UiPath products we would migrate data for, including Insights, Automation Hub, AI Center, and what have been some lessons learned from cloud migration, and a list of resources and people you can go to if you have additional questions on specific aspects of cloud migration. So first off, why cloud migration? You may have seen this meme before. What if I told you the cloud is just someone else's computer? But of course, it's not just that, right? So I stole this pretty slide from the TAM team. A lot of customers are moving to the cloud these days because of any or all of these factors: speed, scalability, stability, security, and savings. So we're seeing a lot of cloud migration projects, especially when customers want to move off of their on-prem instance to benefit from what all the cloud can offer. I know our product team is also working on new SKUs, content, and enhancing our migration tooling to help make these initiatives more efficient. So there's definitely a bit going on in this space. In general, there are three types of migration. We have on-prem to cloud, which is probably over 95% of our migration projects right now. So that's the main need. And then the second kind is from one cloud to another cloud, maybe due to corporate restructuring or business acquisition. The customer might be retiring one cloud and moving everything into another cloud. I had one customer who did just that. And then the third type is suite to cloud. So the customer already has automation suite, but they want to move to our cloud. This is not common yet, but I am right now working on with a customer who's moving from suite to cloud. And also one of our migration tools has recently begun to support this scenario. So there's definitely a use case there. So let me just talk a little bit about the overall strategy and the process. We have a migration questionnaire that gets sent out to customers during the scoping and estimating stage, and it looks like this. So it's basically, we would send this out, the customer would fill it out and come back to us to understand the level of effort. And then from there, the SOW gets signed, and then typically an SA and a PM get assigned to work with the customer on the migration. As you can see, the questionnaire gives us a sense of, what's the size of the data that we're migrating. So how many tenants are we talking about? And then, do they have classic or modern folders or both? How many robots, how many processes? Also, besides Orchestrator, do they have DU models, Action Center, Insights, Automation Hub, and then also a summary of how many licenses they have. So this kind of information helps us understand, how much data we're talking about migrating so that we can get a better estimate and scope. And then after that, for the migration plan, we use this migration tracker, which I'll show you. I think this came from Zach, to track the status of the migration task over the course of the project. So we've got onboarding, planning, and then some configurations. And then for each tenant, we would migrate a list of entities. And then after that, we do some testing, production, go live, and final review. So this tracker is a a plan that we can provide and work with the customer on. So it's clear what are all the tasks that need to be done over the course of the migration project, who's responsible. And we would also provide an estimation of hours for each task so that they can plan, a good project timeline. We would also plan, or a lot of times customers have code freeze that they might want to plan around. So we would also make sure that's accounted for in the project plan. So in terms of timeline, I mean, I've done migration projects that range from anywhere from 4 weeks to 3 months. It really depends on the availability of the customer, how long it takes to get access to their environments so that we can run the migration tools. It could also depend on the readiness of their environment. Sometimes they might need to upgrade to a supported version before we can start migration. In those cases, we would invite infra to assist with the upgrade alongside us before we execute the actual migration. And it also depends on how many tenants the customer needs to migrate. Like sometimes, some customers just have one tenant and some have like six. Some customers have like 15 processes to migrate. Some have like 300. So the migration questionnaire helps us understand the scope of the effort a little bit better. Team, as I mentioned, is typically a two-people team from UiPath working with a point of contact from the customer, maybe their orchestrator, administrator. On our side, it's a PM and an SA, and sometimes an infra at the beginning of the project for an upgrade. And if the customer has a TAM, they might be involved as well. There's been cases I looped in our support team if we run into orchestrator setup issues during the migration, because every customer's on-prem environment is a bit different. Sometimes converting their existing setup to the cloud may result in some random curveballs that's outside of what the SA has seen before. And I found it really helpful to engage our support team and sometimes our product team as needed. And finally, migration tools. Now let's talk about what are the main tools that we have access to for cloud migration. So there are mainly two of them. On the left, we have the cloud migration tool, and then on the right, we have the Orchestrator Manager. In terms of which one to use, we try to use the cloud migration tool whenever possible because it's faster. It's for the most part a click of a button once you fulfill the prerequisites. But you can only use the cloud migration tool if you're going from on-prem to cloud, not from cloud or suite to cloud. Also, there are a list of excluded entities that the cloud migration tool does not migrate. So to fill those gaps, the Orchestrator Manager can be used. This slide also from the TAM team is one way to look at it. If you're doing an overall lift and shift at once, the cloud migration tool is perfect for that. But the Orchestrator Manager gives you a bit more control and flexibility in that you can migrate incrementally. You can pick specific entities that you want to migrate instead of all at once. So it gives you more control, but also requires a bit more setup and runtime. A lot of times the customer just wants to migrate everything anyway, so the cloud migration tool is the first choice of tooling. But the Orchestrator Manager is definitely useful in various edge cases where the cloud migration tool alone does not suffice. Here's another visual that I like. It shows side by side the flow of how each migration tool works and how they differ. For the cloud migration tool at the top, you use the tool to export the data from your source tenant, then import the data to your target cloud tenant, do any manual cleanup as needed, and then repeat for the next tenant. And then for the Orchestrator Manager at the bottom, you extract the entities, meaning assets, packages, processes, queues, triggers, etc. And then you map them to your target as needed, and then load the entities to your target tenant, and then repeat for each tenant. In both cases, we're making a copy of the source, so we're not erasing or replacing anything in the source. Also, in both cases, there may be some entities that don't get migrated by the tools, so you'll need to manually migrate them afterwards. For example, users, roles, and settings. I tried to recover your data, but everything is doggone. So whenever we talk about data or moving data, it's important to think about backups. Fortunately, with the lift and shift methodology that we've been talking about, since we're not erasing or replacing anything, so the data in your source will always be there even after the migration. So there should not be any data loss because we're just putting the copy into the target cloud. Just to give a bit more info on the main tool, the cloud migration tool, it's a UiPath built application for all-at-once migration to UiPath Cal. It connects to a standalone on-prem orchestrator tenant over the API to extract entities into a single JSON file and downloads packages. It imports entities and packages into Automation Cloud from a provided export file. That export file can be modified to meet exact requirements in cloud, but I haven't really had to modify the export file in any way. And then migration logs get generated, which include warnings and error details. So these screenshots here are pretty much the tool. It's just really easy to use. For the Orchestrator Manager, it is an attended automation built by UiPath for interacting with orchestrators. Basically, a solution with a bunch of workflows that you run in Studio. It extracts from your orchestrator, transforms your data in Excel, and then loads to Automation Cloud. And the whole solution is available on our marketplace along with a fairly detailed documentation. So I mentioned briefly earlier that each tool only supports a range of versions. If the customer's on-prem version is too outdated, which is quite common, then they might need to upgrade to a supported version before we can migrate. They can do that themselves or with the assistance of our infra team. Typically, if they're on 20.10 or higher, then they should be good. Also, if they have classic folders, they will need to be converted to modern folders before we can run the migration tool. And there's a wizard that can be used to convert classic folders to modern folders in the settings page of the orchestrator. We've had to do this for a few customers because they were on classic folders still. So that's just something to keep in mind. So we've focused on the orchestrator so far, which is really the main thing customers need to migrate. So it's often the focus of these migration projects. But sometimes customers may also have other UiPath products in their product suite that they would also want to include in the migration. So we'll briefly touch on these. So for example, Insights, Ramon. With Insights, first check if the customer has dashboards and data in their instance. Sometimes they might just have the Insights service enabled, but aren't actually using it. In that case, nothing might need to be migrated. But if they do have dashboards and data, then dashboards can be migrated using the built-in export and import functionality if the customer is on 20.10 or higher. Also, users can be migrated using a user migration tool in Insights. If they're on an older version of Insights before 21.10, then the dashboards cannot be migrated using the export import functionality because the export and the import are in different file formats. However, the PS team offers to help rebuild 5 custom dashboards for customers for free, including 1 ROI dashboard max. And then the prerequisites involve for using that Insights data migration tool involve having the customer import their existing data into an Azure database and provide us with a connection string. So it's basically a tool that the product team led by Jack Miller has created just to migrate the Insights data. It's a little bit of pre-work on the customer end because especially if they're not an Azure shop, but currently that's the only way. So besides the dashboards, if Insights data needs to be migrated, that's the tool that we will be using. Once the customer has completed the prereqs, like creating the Azure database and provide us with the connection string, then the actual migration is expected to complete within a couple of days with minimal downtime. And a note about historical data, sometimes customers ask about that. When you enable Insights on a tenant, the historical data from the orchestrator service on that tenant is automatically ingested in Insights. So that's handy. And lastly, just some context here in case you have additional questions about Insights or Insights migration. Automation Hub is another UiPath product that customers may want to migrate. Our product team does have a script available to carry out the migration on the back end. It took me a little back and forth with different teams to find out who to go to for that. But you would just basically need to contact Dan and Jay Suresh to execute automation of back-end migration from cloud to cloud if that's in scope for the migration. For AI Center, these are basically the components in AI Center. Some of these can be migrated while some just cannot be migrated. So you would have to let the customer know and see if it's acceptable to them given the limitation. So let's go through these real quick. Data sets can be migrated. You can just download the data sets from your source instance, then upload files to your target cloud environment. Data labeling sessions can be done as well. You can export from the source document manager, download as a zip, create a new document manager in your target instance, then open the session and import the zip package. ML packages can also be migrated by downloading the packages and importing into your target cloud environment. The caveat is these can be quite large, so expect to spend a lot of time and your computer's resources to download these few packages. For one of my customers, their ML packages were so huge that they actually took up almost all of my hard drive space in my UiPath laptop. I almost had to request a new one. And lastly, pipelines, ML skills, and ML logs cannot be migrated. Pipelines and ML skills will need to be manually recreated after the migration, and ML logs just cannot be recreated or migrated. But customers are usually okay with losing these. Just make sure you bring it up to them ahead of time. Maybe they can have a local backup. And here are the contexts for AI Center if you have any additional specific questions. So lessons learned. Keeps all passwords in an Excel file in the network shared folder. Obviously, this is just a joke. Of course, we would never want to do that, but it does bring into light something to keep in mind, which is that passwords are not migrated with either of the migration tools for good reasons. So it's typically a post-migration step that the customer has to carry out manually on their own after we're done with the migration. And this is usually for credential assets. Sometimes this could be a concern. For example, if I had a customer earlier, they had like hundreds and hundreds of passwords to update. So in cases like that, the Orchestrator Manager can be used to mass update passwords, but it's not ideal, though it can be done. What they would do is put all the passwords in an Excel file, and then the Orchestrator Manager will take the Excel as an input to mass update the passwords in the orchestrator by making API calls. So just know that it can be done if asked, but should be avoided. And there's another gotcha with Orchestrator Manager, which is that migrating assets can result in errors because of how Excel formats dates. So when you migrate a bunch of assets, make sure to check if there are any date fields in the assets. If so, you may need to do some manual fixes. Number three, not everything in AI Center can be migrated, and ML packages can take a long time, regularly causing timeouts due to significant file sizes. We talked about that. And then insights and automation hub migration might require product teams to carry out some steps in the backend since the migration tools might not be sufficient. And five, our team is not, we had to learn this the hard way. Our team's not really equipped to customize pipeline release scripts for customers. So it's better to leave this out from the get-go if that's in the discussion. And then six, during estimation and scoping phase, understand the extent of manual migration steps that will be needed. For example, the migration tools cannot take care of account mappings, and this could require significant manual effort. One customer I had over 200 robot accounts that needed to be manually mapped with like hundreds of processes. So that definitely took a lot of manual cleanups time after the migration tools ran. And then number seven, define the hypercare period more strictly so client won't come back to project team for support issues unrelated to migration long past project completion date. I guess this is true for any other RPA projects. And lastly, product team and product support team are your friends. They are definitely a good source of knowledge if you have any questions or experience any hiccups during migration. So if you ever participate in a migration project or need to advise a customer on migration methodology, here are all the helpful docs and links you can refer to. And just Lastly, as with any project, knowing where to get help when needed is probably one of the most critical things. I've done the legwork to put together this list of SMEs and Slack channels that can help with answers if you have questions with any specific area in cloud migration. So feel free to keep this slide as a reference. I know we're a few minutes over, but that's it. Any questions or comments on cloud migration? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel for upcoming content on how to start or build a career in tech, how to automate using low-code RPA, how to build real-time low-code data pipelines, and other tech content.
Visit us at UiPath.com to learn more.